That's how we work together for 30 years. It's like a partner for life, right? Like everybody's crazy. If you get two of the same crazy, it's too crazy. If you get opposite crazy, it's too, yeah. That you need compatible crazy. And we're compatible crazy. So, yeah, I always made things pretty and he makes things functional. That was kind of our way. Yeah, so he's super analytical. I'm not. That's even better. And he was always the smartest kid in school, so I said, so I don't know if that default makes me the smartest kid in school or not. Second smartest. So the way our still works, probably a little bit different than the ones you've seen today, or maybe the one that you took 4 times, which I'll get to in a second. Well, yeah, so distilling, I forget it's everybody's first. So distilling, it's not as mystical and magical as we will want you to think it is. It's not too bad. You start by making your alcohol first. So beer, wine, and spirits all start the same way. So you have to start by making your alcohol by taking a sugar source and you introduce a yeast strain to it. And when yeast eat sugars, they make equal parts of CO2 and a bunch of alcohols. And those yeasts kind of keep eating all their foods until they're out of food. They've made so much alcohol that the environment they've been living in, it becomes poisonous to them. Our strains last between like 3 and 7 days, 3 for our bourbon, 7 for our rums. They all pass away, leaving between an 8 to 10% alcohol solution. That's where beer and wine stop. Distilling just takes it to another step by taking what we just made, which we call a mash, and putting it into our still. And stills you can just think as big boilers. So our still works different than probably most of them that you've seen. Most stills have a big mixer and agitator in there to keep that mash moving so it doesn't burn and scorch. Because we made this guy ourselves, we didn't want to put a mixer and agitator in there. Because we were afraid to hit that measured frequency where stuff likes to rattle itself apart. Yeah, Rick calls it resonance. Whatever. So we just made a big double boiler. So what I mean by that, since we can't mix the mash on the inside, we have to treat our mashes like we're going to let melt chocolate on the stove. You take your pan of chocolate, put a pan of boiling water so it melts evenly. That's how our still works. So this dome is mirrored on the bottom, create a pod. That pod holds our mash, and that pod is that single steel tank. Inside that tank, we just made a water bed. Well, it's water plus a food-grade glycol. Yeah, I discovered that in a fun way. Because it took us 8 months to launch, we had all the windows papered up. Because we had a ton of copper sitting there. And when you start off as a distillery, you don't want to run around town telling everybody going to be a distillery because you have a ton of copper sitting there. But now you can imagine from the other side, if a company is going to open up in town, all the windows are papered up and they're being real quiet about what they're going to bake. Yeah, and you guys know how small towns talk. Yeah, there was a good segment of population down here that's pretty sure that we were going to be a adult bookstore, parlor. Yeah, fire distilled for the first time, just the water bath, which means that water got way too hot when we boiled it, which made a ton of steam. So we steamed up all the windows. Yeah, and then Rick and I walk out. Yeah, they must have been like, discount massage parlor. Those boys are not going to make it. So we had a food grade glycol. We had like 240 degrees Fahrenheit, and our heat source is just 3 hot water heater elements that we picked up at Home Depot. So running our still is really easy. You turn on those elements, heats up that water bath, transfers heat inside that pod. And when the inside of that pod hit 178 degrees Fahrenheit, that's where your ethanol evaporates. And somebody discovered a long time ago that if you get your vapor to touch copper, there's this really cool reaction where it starts to clean it. It starts to take out like dead D cells and sulfides. So we just wanted to touch as much copper as possible. So as that vapor comes up, it leaves our helmet, it's going to come across, down, that hot vapor goes in that coil. We hit it with cold water from the bottom. That cold water turns that hot vapor back into a liquid. That goes through this guy. This is actually called a parrot. It's filling up from the bottom, making our hydrometer flow, and the overflow goes into our bucket. So it's not too bad. It's kind of boring stuff. Yeah, stills just got a bad rap back in the day because when people make them, they sneak off in the woods. They hard solder all their equipment, so they can't take them apart. Their mash is usually kind of chunky. You know they're cleaning them all the time, right? Yeah. If that ever clogs up, you create a pressure vessel. If that vessel happens to rupture over a source of ignition, that's when it all goes bad. So if you're still at homes ever making more than 3 pounds of pressure, turn it off. Just put one out there. You'd be surprised the number of people actually do that. So for our still, we have to do 2 different types of runs because when those yeast are eating sugars, they're making equal parts of CO2 and a bunch of alcohols. They don't make pure ethanol. So the first one we do is called a stripping run. That's what we're doing, is we're stripping all those alcohols out of that mash. So our still holds 53 gallons of mash at about an 8% alcohol solution, loaded in, and we just boil it. And so we're just taking out the alcohols. We're going to go from 53 gallons of mash to get about 12 gallons of alcohol. We're going from that 8% alcohol solution to 30% alcohol solution because we have all the alcohol in one place. We call that low wines. And now that we have the low wines, all the alcohols, we can do our second type of run. And the second type of run is a spirit run. And a spirit run is just pouring the low wines. So when you do that, you can separate each type of alcohol by time and temperature. That's what they keep talking about, cuts. Yeah, which isn't too bad. So we load in our low wines, you start to boil it. As the temp starts to climb at the late 160s, early 170s, you can boil off with the wood alcohols. That's all the stuff that smells like airplane glue, nail polish, and acetone. Yeah, the stuff that's supposed to make you blind. Yeah, it's a really easy cut to make off this guy. When it comes off, it's like poison, not poison, cool. So you just cut that. You hit a sweet spot at 178, that's where your ethanol is evaporating, and you start your hearts run. So now you're pulling off really good stuff. And as you do, the volume of the tank goes down, so now there's less liquid, but the same amount of heat, which means the inside temperature is going to go up. It's going to start to boil off some of those oils and concentrates to give your spirit flavor. Before that tastes off, you cut that. That's the hearts of a run. That's the stuff that goes into bottles and barrels, and the rest is called tails. And that's more oils and concentrates, so we give about 5 gallons of that to set the flavor profile.
What's it called?
Tails? Yeah. So oh, you're fine. So for the advanced class, the first time you ever run a still, you get a big folding table, a couple long pieces of paint tape, and a bunch of 1-ounce glasses and a Sharpie. To make those cuts now, it's super easy. So you run your still from beginning to end, and as you do, you take in a 1-ounce sample, and you write down your time, temp. Now you have all these great samples that you can make your cuts from. So the head's cut, all the wood alcohols, poison, not poison. Cool. So I know at this time, with this temperature, I can ignore everything. Get that sweet spot at 178, that's the beginning of your heart, and it's great. So you're like, good. I think one of the choices in distilling that you have to make is it's tricky for a distiller to pick the difference between, or make that transition between your hearts and tails cut. Because it's hard for us as humans to quantify the difference between like good, okay, and bad. And that's what's happening down here. You're like, this is good, that's pretty good, that's okay, that's definitely bad. So now I gotta figure out where I want to make my cut. And that's where our barrels come in, because we're using these 15-gallon barrels. And if I cut this 15 and a 53-gallon barrel in half, you can imagine we're going to get a lot more touches with a smaller barrel, or we're going to get our color and flavor profile. And with those more touches, we're going to be able to pull it out a little bit faster, say in around 2 years. Where these 53 gallons is like 4 years minimum, because we have so much wood to liquid ratio. So the advantage of time, like being able to pull it out in 2 years, but our disadvantage is when you're getting down into these longer chemical chains, or when you get down in these samples, you're creating longer chemical chains that only break apart over time, and then we don't have time on our side. So we actually have to take the hearts of our hearts, cut the best of the best stuff, which curbs our scale of economy, we get product to market, which keeps the lights on. Where our friends, they can dip in that tails just a little bit, which gives them a lot more product than the amount of effort they put in, which is their super. Does that kind of make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. And then you just determine what type of spirit you're making by the ingredient you start with. That's the easiest way to look at it. So if you start with any grain at all, you're going to make a whiskey. The usual ones are what? Corn, wheat, rye, barley. But even if you did like oats or rice, or like spelt or millet, it's still a grain, so you still be making a whiskey. So if you think of whiskey as a big old tree, the branches of the whiskey tree are created by how you treat those grains and possibly a region. So like Scotch is a branch, Irish whiskey is a branch, Japanese whiskey is a branch, and bourbon is a branch. So to make the bourbon branch, you need to follow a couple of rules. You have to start with at least 51% corn. The reason they made that rule is we were just lousy with corn around. It was just a way to turn a crop after the growing season something you sell or trade. And it's a certain taste profile. You have to distill it under 160. The reason they made that rule, the higher the proof off the still, the cleaner the taste. So 160 sounds like a lot, but they're retaining a lot of flavor to it, which makes it great for like bourbons and brandies. Once it comes off of 160, if we cut that proof number in half, that's your percentage of alcohol. So what is that, 8% alcohol? That was pretty high. So before we can add it to a barrel, we actually have to start adding water to it to drop that proof down below at least 125. We're dropping ours between like 115 and 117. And once it's been diluted, you can add it to a barrel. But the barrel needs special things too. It has to be brand new. It has to be American white oak. probably because we had a Kentucky Center with a White Oak Farm at some point, for sure.
Yeah,
It's
the
charred on the
unions.
inside, which means burnt. So the second that distillate touches the barrel, it's technically bourbon. Even if it's a second old. It's not good bourbon, but it's bourbon. And then you get into all the labeling rules. So if I can follow all those rules, ferment, distill, and age in Kentucky for 1 year, I can now put Kentucky bourbon on our labels. Any whiskey that you can age for 2 years, you're allowed to put straight whiskey on your labels. So if I can ferment, distill, and age in Kentucky for 2 years, on our labels we can put Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. Does that make sense? Yeah, we have a rule book like that big. It's much easier to see it than a friend's bottles. Like our buddies at New Riff, making every drop on site, aging way over 2 years. That's what they have. It's a Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. I love to keep that Boone County bottle next to it because that was their transition project. Those guys were blowing up so fast, they had to take some of the Kentucky bourbon and complement it with a little bit of Indiana bourbon, which now means they can't put Kentucky on the label, but they're still aging over 2 years, so that label just says straight bourbon whiskey. And you'd always think of the small batch above it as straight market. Yeah, small batch for the big guys is what? Like 300 to 500 barrels for sure. Small batch for Boone County, I think is around 5. And then the barrel next to that, Hartfield and Company, they're rocking 5-gallon barrels. And a 5-gallon barrel will age out anywhere from what, 9 to 11 months? So he's about a month short of being a Kentucky bourbon and about 13 months short of being a straight whiskey. So all he can really put on his labels is just bourbon whiskey. And you have to bottle at least 80 proof, and when you really start to nerd out about bourbon, somewhere on that label, it always has to tell you it was distilled and bottled by, so then you can start to see the parent companies, the brands that they, which is super fun game. We start with anything that comes from the sugarcane plant, meaning sugarcane juice, or molasses. You're now making rums. We use a high-grade molasses. If you use any fruit at all, you're making a brandy. Some people don't realize that vodka is just a fruit. Vodka is 190 proof. Because again, the higher the proof off the still, the cleaner the taste. So by the time you hit 190, that spirit's actually becoming odorless and tasteless, and that's the definition of vodka. So you can start with anything. So if Rick and I had an apple mash, we took it off the still at 160, because we started with the fruit, we just made an apple brandy. Same exact mash, taken off the still at 190, it's so clean now that we have an apple vodka. Yeah, we started with the wheated mash, took it off the still at 160, because we started with the grain, we just made a wheated whiskey. Same exact mash bill, taken off the still at 190, it's so clean now that we have a wheated vodka. And potatoes are awful, because that spud is mostly water weight, so you can be lousy with potatoes. That's why they use a Russia Idaho. Yeah, it's whatever you had after the growing season. Our German friend told us there's a ton of stills this size in Germany, because for 1 week a year, German farmers can turn all the stone fruits that they grew that they didn't sell in the summer, they can ferment and distill them in the brands of schnapps so they can sell during their super fun winter markets. Yeah. Now if you take that vodka, you add the juniper berry to it, you get into the world of gin. Tequila is part of the mezcal tree. It's a branch of that comes from the blue agave plant and a region of Mexico. Yeah, which means if we got a ton of blue agave and we ran it through our system, I'm actually making agave spirit because we don't have the provenance being tequila Mexico. And again, anything that you made that you didn't pay your federal and or state tax on is moonshine. Which also means it's not like stripping time, melt your face off stuff. It just means you didn't get it, man. Yeah. We play a super fun game down here. People come off the street all the time with unmarked jars. I made this. You want some? First, I get like super judgy because it could be amazing. Yeah, last October, best one I've ever had. There's this label that said Captain Jeff's on it. Yeah, he did a high rye bourbon. Honestly, it was better than some of our friends. Good job, Captain Jeff. 5 years ago, though, weirdest one. This old boy walked in off the street with a unmarked jar and sat it down. I didn't mention it. He starts talking to Rick and I, and we're side-eyeing each other, like, where's this going? And finally he's like, can I ask you a couple questions? Like, yeah, of course. He's like, I made this. We're like, yeah, man, we kind of figured. Like, what's your question? He's like, you think I can drink it? Like, maybe. Like, why don't you walk me through what you did and see where you're at? So this guy, he said he mashed in some apples and fermented it. I guess that went okay. So he took that mash and he distilled it. I guess that went okay. But when he's taking apart a still to pour out the stillage, what was left over, this feather came out. Yeah, they couldn't figure out where this feather came from. So he's looking and thinking about it. Finally starts poking the feather. Turns out the feather's actually a mouse that had crawled into his fermenter. And he boiled it so much it looked like a feather. Yeah, I remember the question you asked me. Did they think I drink this? I'm like, not here. And then my follow-up question was like, what makes you think you could? And this is the hard part because his logic, I mean, it was sound, it was just super broken. Because he's like, well, I downloaded some instruction and been doing some reading. I'm like, uh-huh. He's like, now is it true that ethanol is blown off at 178 degrees Fahrenheit? I'm like, yeah, that's right. He's like, then I was just figuring you cook chicken at what, 165? Like, sweet broken grill. Yeah, we're an amazing species.
So you are a